Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to this short webinar on bottled water market trends and the 2017 Global Congress. I'm Richard Hall, I'm the chairman of Zenith, and I'm joined by Matt Wilton, who's Zenith's commercial director.
Hello everyone.
We've got lots of familiar faces in the audience, but for those of you who don't know Zenith so well, we seek to support the industry as global food and drink experts. We have four main activities: advisory, which is commercial consulting; technical operations consulting; insight, which Matt will come on to later; and live events. So I'll first quickly introduce our next 2017 Global Bottled Water Congress. This is our 14th Global Bottled Water Congress. It's on the 23rd to the 25th of October, and it's in Barcelona. It's sponsored by several leading industry suppliers: Bericap, Poly1, Sidel, and Tetra Pak. We have additional support from AF Compressors, AGR, Demo, Go to Life, and Water.io. Generally, we have about 150-200 delegates from top global and regional producers. Already, bookings are up to nearly 100. A particular highlight is the Global Bottled Water Awards, which are presented at a gala dinner. And we also have close to 100 entries for that so far. The full program and online booking details are on the zenithglobal.com website/events. Previous congresses have been either close to major sources like Evian and San Pellegrino and Gerolsteiner and Highland Spring, and as well sometimes in major markets, not just in Europe, but also Mexico, Brazil, and the US. And the Middle East. So we're trying to take people around the world to see big markets and interesting sources. And this is the first time we're going back to the same place as it's so popular, Barcelona. For the program this year, we'll have discussions on industry-wide initiatives, and I think that's getting more attention now. We always give a global market overview, and Matt will come on to that shortly. And we'll have sessions on investing in growth and added value, packaging innovation, branding, and we'll highlight some breakthrough new businesses with an entrepreneur shootout. For our speakers, well, we have industry leaders such as Coca-Cola and Nestle and PepsiCo and Boss. We also have many other key regional players, from Agthia in the Middle East, who are growing internationally, right through to Uho, which is the latest water with edible packaging. And we're joined by many industry suppliers and advisors. I do hope you'll all attend. I believe there's an offer for new bookings before Friday. You'll receive an email with details after the webinar. I'm now going to move on to Matt. Do send your questions as they occur to you, and then we will try and take them, as we should have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. And we'll cover as much as we possibly can during that. Now on to Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, and hello again, everyone. So I'm just going to take a few minutes today to go through the top line market trends within beverages, and then specifically drilling down to look at the top line trends within bottled water. We'll be accessing information from Zenith's global beverage databases, which are our annual look at the key industry metrics. I should say that today we will talk through a selection of the information, a selection of the data, with more detail and greater depth to follow at the Congress in Barcelona next month. So, kicking off with a look at the overall global beverage sectors, basically we see a situation where the overall category is closing in now on 900 billion litres. Soft drinks leads the way, and along with hot drinks continue to dominate the picture. But elsewhere, we've seen growth across all segments. Alcohol and milk of a similar size, really, and most categories in at least 2% volume year-on-year growth. So the first look at the overall category is quite positive. Looking at where the growth has come from. And this is becoming a familiar but incredibly positive picture for anyone operating in the bottled water space. So where's the growth come from? Well, basically, looking at this chart, we see over the last 5 years that 114 billion litres of additional volume has come through from the bottled water segment, and it's consistently driven the category over the last 5 years. That being said, although it's really clearly out there on its own in terms of importance, there's been important contribution too from tea, from milk, and from coffee. And although obviously the bulk of what we will discuss today and in Barcelona would be in the soft drinks and water space, it's worth noting that those trends in tea and coffee and hot drinks are also quite important. Just drilling down to look at really at the sub-segment level, and here looking at carbonates, water, concentrates, fruit juice, nectars, iced tea, some of the sectors that we track. It's really long been the case now, or some time ago, that water as a total category overtook carbonates in terms of volume importance. But what's quite interesting this year has been a shift within small pack water. So there's still a gap, but we see that the second line down on the chart, the small pack water is really now closing the gap on carbonated soft drinks. And if that trend continues, we would expect a convergence point over the next few years. So small pack obviously driven very much by health convenience. It's also worth noting that bulk water has also seen some significant increase too. So across both key segments of the water market, the picture is very positive. Obviously, one driven more by convenience, bulk driven more by necessity and more by a need to access potable water. Just looking briefly at some of the other segments that we track, really with the exception of juice drinks in the latest year, there's been a positive growth story. A lot of these segments are on the global scale are quite small, but still even around the kind of 5 to 10 billion litre category, not insignificant. And generally, as I've said, all of soft drinks are experiencing growth. So what does that mean in terms of market share? Well, the runaway success story remains bottled water. So this chart looks at sector shares in 2016 and how that compares to 5 years previously. Bottled water has ticked up 3 share points on the global stage. Most other categories are fairly consistent, just a sort of move of 1% in either direction, but really it's bottled water that's the winner. So I guess the other point on this slide is that there's still a lot of headroom for growth. So bottled water is still under 20% of the overall global beverage landscape. A very dynamic sector, but still with a lot of headroom for share growth. The next slide looks at all water segments. So this is plain water. It's also flavoured and functional water. It's and also small pack and bulks. It's the overall water category, and we see it's nearing the 400 billion litre mark. The CAGR has been at 6.8% over the review period on this slide, and essentially it underpins this incredibly positive growth story that we all know, and I think increasingly are recognising as established. From a value perspective, the CAGR, so versus that 6.8% on the previous slide, the CAGR is 5.9. So it is slightly lower. Essentially, we don't see this as significant. The category in value terms is approaching $180 billion. And essentially factors such as popularity of small pack, premium waters are all helping to support category value. So despite the growth, despite the maturity in a lot of markets, we're not seeing a complete commoditization that we might otherwise expect. Looking at plain, very much the lion's share of the overall water category, and up 6.9% on a compound basis. Regionally, we see that the Asia market has gained at the expense of the more developed markets. So from a share perspective, it's gained 7 share points in the last 5 years, which is incredibly significant, with Asia now sitting at 41% category share. And when we drill down to look at individual country sources of growth, where's it come from? Well, yes, no great surprise, China has been incredibly strong. An extra 35 billion litres coming out of China in the last 5 years, which is not quite, but very nearly a doubling in size of that market in such a short period of time. Other countries have made a really significant contribution too. The US, India, Indonesia, all in double figures in terms of billions of litres contribution. So it's a pretty mixed story. Essentially, there are only one market in that top 10, what you would describe as developed and mature in the US. So many of the others still developing, still growing. Very quick look at the Water Plus market, which is flavoured and flavoured functional, so anything with added taste or functionality, minerals, etc. Both have enjoyed growth in the latest year. Globally, both small, but interestingly, both back where you would want them to be. So just pulling together, final couple of thoughts. We've seen another great year of growth in bottled water. The core messages remain relevant: health, hydration, and we sense more to come from a forecast perspective. Share gain has been at the expense of those sectors perceived as less healthy, carbonates and juices under pressure, certainly from a volume perspective, although in many markets carbonates holds up reasonably well in value terms. Flavoured water on the up, particularly driven by natural, by low calorie. And just to reiterate the last point, today is a taste of what we will present in October.
Thank you, Matt. Questions? Please do ask any questions if you have them about the detail, questioning whether we have covered everything that you want. Got two just up here now. The first is regarding the increase in water small pack. What do you consider as small pack?
So technically small pack is anything under 10 litres, because anything over 10 litres we consider as bulk. However, the majority of what we're talking about when we talk about small pack is under 2 litres in size. Could you share this presentation? We will be doing that after this webinar, so you will receive an email with access to not only the presentation but also a recording of it. Is there any premiumization going on outside the USA? So I think the US, in terms of scale, is where we're seeing a lot of the premiumization. That being said, we note ongoing activity in terms of players in the premium glass, either still or sparkling space, looking at the export market for those products. So US is where there's the scale at the moment, but we see quite large growth, albeit from a low base, in other global markets. In the last 10 years, it has been a bit of a struggle to achieve some of the premiumization that companies have sought. There's been almost a commoditization. I would say that there's a particular opportunity in China. It's quite small in undeveloped markets, but I'm sure that it will over time grow, and the convenience factor will become more important too. Could you circulate this deck? Yes, we've talked about premiumization. The next question was, what could happen in China market to show that growth?
So what about China and growth, Ed? In fact, let's answer about general growth. Do we expect growth to continue at the same rate, or higher, or lower?
Well, at this point, I mean, the growth rates are quite well established and consistently in that 5 to 7% mark. And really, we're not seeing too many causes for pressure on that growth rate. I think we would expect a continuation at a global level. Obviously, the global figures mask significant differences at an individual market level, but globally, we've got a really strong backdrop for future planning, future investment, future launch.
I guess that in China, if their economic growth can continue, that market can continue growing, and it's still got a lot of catch up to do in per capita consumption.
It has. I think one of the interesting potential emerging trends with China is forecast population growth.
Yep.
And that actually, you know, obviously a lot of what underpins water's performance is general population increase. I think some of the mid to longer term forecasts for China show a real slowdown in population growth. So clearly that's something we're going to be keeping an eye on, and that might take some of the heat out of the market.
What trends do you think are relevant for the category? For example, betterment or category blurring? Betterment, I presume, being functionality and added benefit. Category blurring being the mixing with juice or with water-based products. And I think there's a category blurring also for consumers between maple and coconut and watermelon and other things like that, which are really juices or juice drinks. What about that? Are we going to see more category blurring and more functionality?
Well, it's interesting that the functional water market has ticked back up again, which is suggesting more launch in that area, more relevance to consumer. I mean, blurring just seems to be...
It's going on everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. It just seems to be a permanent fixture now within the market. I can't think that it would reverse.
Okay. Is the increase in water small pack also influencing the pack mix? In general, it's quite PET dominated marketed. However, we do see new initiatives in different pack types coming to the market. So we are seeing more cartons, we are seeing more pouches, we are seeing more cans, and I think that the bags in some of the emerging markets are gradually phasing out. But people still seem to want to see a clear see-through packaging. What about innovation in packaging?
I think a lot of the innovation remains around the sustainability point. So rather than necessarily different pack types, I mean, obviously there are some. I think a lot of the innovation is still around materials for packaging.
Yeah. And the other thing is that bulk water is still very important to the volume growth. And although there may be more convenience and premiumization in single serve packs, we'll probably still see a lot of water need, water necessity, rather than water lifestyle as the only driver. What trends are there for point of use water? Is this still a threat to home and office delivery in developed markets? My view is that it is, because it may be cheaper, it involves less packaging, it's less inconvenient, it involves less storage, but home and office delivery seems to be holding its own, and machines and design and service and so on are improving all the time.
Yeah, I think also there are instances where, for whatever reasons, even though you know, POU may make more economic sense, for example, there are still scenarios where customers, businesses prefer to have the physical cooler, and you know, we've noted that in a few markets, and it should support ongoing.
Any surprising markets growing? Nigeria is interesting. Yes, Nigeria is interesting. Oil prices have affected a lot of African economies, and obviously the nature of government is an issue in many African countries too. But the Nigerian population is the thing that is going to grow. They're going to be the third most populous country in the world in not too distant times, and so Nigeria is a big one to watch. But at the moment, African growth is not what it could become, I would say. What are the fastest growing markets in flavoured water and why? We may have to get back.
I think we might have to dig into that.
I guess it has to be. Yes, it's very varied. The US is clearly very important there. Some of the European markets, the Czech Republic's always been very strong. Argentina also. It's not developing as fast as we think it can become. I think the US is particularly interesting because it's the sweet spot between carbonates and water with flavour and health. We've probably got a moment for one more question. Just quickly, let's see. Innovation. What about innovation? Anything new coming up?
Within beverage generally, I think there's always plenty of innovation. Somebody has asked a question around children's drinks and innovation in that area, which seems to continue to.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going on there.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. I mean, you know, in the wider markets, things like drinking vinegars, kefirs, those kind of products seem to be gaining more traction as well. And they're not necessarily completely new, but seem to be really kind of gaining momentum.
Last question, very quickly, about PET coming under threat. I think sustainability is the wild card for bottled water, not because it's unsustainable, but because consumers may question perceptions of it, and particularly waste. So we have to do better with lightweighting, with recycling. Governments have to do better with programs. And I think that we can provide the answers. Water is actually the most locally distributed product of all beverages in most cases, and it has no ingredients, so it has a very low carbon footprint. So I think there are a lot, and it does a great deal for the social local economies as well. So I think there are very strong arguments in favour of water, but they will have to be put forward by the industry. I think we're going to have to finish there. Thank you, Matt. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening. We're running out of time. We'll send you an email, we'll send you the slides, we'll send you a recording, and you'll be able to see the questions, I think, too. And any
questions we haven't managed to get to, obviously we'll try and respond to those as well.
And do come to Barcelona. We've got a good turnout, great speakers, and it should be a good event. Thank you.